47 crews had tried to enter the Obsidian Spire. 47 crews had failed. Some came out screaming. Some came out silent, their minds broken beyond repair. Most never came out at all. The tower stood at the center of Station Meridian 7, a black needle of ancient stone and twisted metal that reached up through the station's artificial sky. 200 years ago, scientists had tried to create unlimited energy inside its walls. Instead, they tore a hole in reality itself. Everyone died. The tower became cursed, haunted, and very, very dirty. Administrator Helwick rubbed his 4 eyes with exhaustion as he reviewed the newest job application. Another human. They kept coming to the station, these strange creatures from the death world called Earth. This one was older, 58 years according to his file. A janitor by trade. 30 years of experience cleaning factories, hospitals, and office buildings. His name was Dennis Kowalski, and he had arrived on the station 3 days ago with nothing but 2 suitcases and a coffee maker. "You understand what you are applying for?" Helwick asked during the interview. His gray hands trembled slightly. The Obsidian Spire has killed more beings than any other location in Coalition space. Dennis shrugged. He was a thick man with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Triple hazard pay, right?" "Yes, but the danger. I spent 30 years cleaning a meat processing plant in Wisconsin," Dennis said. "You want to talk to me about danger?" "I once had to unclog a drain filled with 6 months of pig fat while my supervisor screamed at me about overtime costs. Nothing in that tower is worse than that." Helwick did not understand most of those words, but he understood the tone. This human was not afraid. Perhaps he was simply too old and too tired to feel fear anymore. "Very well," Helwick said. "You may assess the building." "We only ask that you—" "I'll start tomorrow," Dennis interrupted. "I need to buy supplies first." He started that afternoon instead. The massive doors of the Obsidian Spire had not opened in 3 years. When Dennis pushed his cleaning cart toward them, every alien on the station stopped to watch. Bravari security officers with their rhinoceros-like faces stood ready to retrieve his body. Palori bureaucrats took notes for the insurance claim. A small crowd gathered behind safety barriers, waiting for the screams. Dennis ignored them all. He pushed the button beside the door. Nothing happened. He pushed it again. Still nothing. "Huh," he said. He reached into his cart, pulled out a small can of lubricant, and sprayed the button mechanism. He pushed it a 3rd time. The doors groaned open, releasing 2 centuries of stale air and darkness. Dennis walked inside. The doors slammed shut behind him with terrible finality. Inside the tower, reality was broken. The entrance hall stretched impossibly long, its end vanishing into shadow. The walls breathed. The floor shifted beneath his feet like something alive. Whispers echoed from every direction, speaking in languages that had never existed. Dennis looked around. He found a light switch on the wall and flipped it. Half the lights came on, flickering and weak. "Could be worse," he muttered. He began walking, pushing his cart ahead of him. The wheels squeaked on the dusty marble floor. That squeak became the only normal sound in a building full of nightmares on the 3rd floor. A spectral figure burst through the wall. It was twisted and wrong, a shape that hurt to look at, and it screamed with the agony of 200 years of torment. The sound shook the walls. The temperature dropped until Dennis could see his own breath. Dennis stopped walking. He looked at the figure. He had seen worse things in the mirror after Carol died, during those long nights when grief made him a ghost in his own home. "Hey," he said, "you know where they keep the mop buckets around here?" The figure stopped screaming. It hung in the air, confused. In 200 years, no one had ever simply spoken to it. Everyone else had run or fought or gone mad. No one had ever just asked a question. Dennis waited for an answer. When none came, he shrugged. "I'll find them myself, I guess." He continued walking, leaving the frozen spirit behind. He found a maintenance closet on floor 3 and decided it would make a good bedroom. Small but private. He had slept in worse places during his years of night shifts. By evening, Dennis had cataloged the first 5 floors. Severe dust accumulation. Water damage in several areas. Multiple dimensional anomalies that would need to be worked around. At least 3 more ghosts, all of whom seemed too confused by his presence to attack. He set up his coffee maker in the maintenance closet, brewed a pot, and sat down with a paperback Western novel he had brought from Earth. Outside the tower, the station held its breath. Security monitors showed his vital signs. Heart rate steady, breathing normal, stress hormones minimal. Chief Dranik, the Bravari security commander, stared at the readings in disbelief. "That is impossible," he said. "No one stays calm in the spire." But Dennis Kowalski was calm. He was 60 years old, recently widowed, and far from home. He had already faced the worst thing life could throw at him. What was a haunted building compared to losing the woman he loved? He finished his coffee, turned off the light, and went to sleep. In the darkness of the obsidian spire, something ancient stirred. It had felt the human enter. It had expected fear like always. Instead, it felt something it had not encountered in 2 centuries. Patience. The tower did not know what to make of that. 3 weeks passed, and Dennis Kowalski did not die. This was, according to every statistical model the Coalition possessed, impossible. The average survival time inside the Obsidian Spire was 4 hours. The previous record was 6 days, set by a team of military specialists equipped with dimensional shielding and psychic dampeners. They had lasted 6 days before one of them tried to eat his own arm. Dennis had been in there for 21 days. He had established a routine. Wake at 6 in the morning, station time. Brew coffee. Eat breakfast from his supplies. Begin cleaning at 7. Work until 6 in the evening. Eat dinner. Read. Sleep. Repeat. The spectral figure from his first night followed him now. She no longer screamed. She simply drifted behind him as he worked, watching with empty eyes as he scrubbed 2 centuries of grime from marble floors. Dennis talked to her while he worked. He was used to talking to himself during long shifts, and talking to a ghost was not much different. "Carol and I got married young," he told her one morning, working on a particularly stubborn stain on floor 7. "Both 19. Everyone said it wouldn't last. Showed them, though. 38 years. The ghost tilted her head. Something flickered in her hollow expression. "She passed last spring. Cancer. Quick, at least. She didn't suffer long." Dennis scrubbed harder. "Kids wanted me to move in with one of them, but I couldn't sit around all day thinking about her. Needed to keep busy. Saw this job posting and figured, why not? See the galaxy." He laughed without humor. Didn't expect the galaxy to be mostly paperwork and haunted buildings. But here we are. The ghost made a sound. Not a scream this time. Something softer, almost like a word. "What's that?" Dennis looked up at her. "Daughter," the ghost whispered. It was the first word she had spoken in 200 years. "I had a daughter." Dennis nodded slowly. "What was her name?" The ghost's form flickered with distress. "I do not remember. I do not remember anything. Only pain. Only the tower." "That's all right," Dennis said gently. "It'll come back. These things take time." He returned to his scrubbing. "You got a name? Something I can call you." More flickering. Fragments of memory struggling to surface. "Millicent," she finally said. "Dr. Millicent Farrow. I was a researcher. Nice to meet you, Millicent. I am Denise. Mind if I call you Millie?" The ghost considered this for a long moment. "Millie," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, I think I like that." Outside the tower, the station had become obsessed with Dennis Kowalski. Security Chief Dranik reviewed his biosigns every hour. Heart rate never exceeded 75 beats per minute. Blood pressure remained stable. The man showed less stress cleaning a cursed building than most beings showed during a normal workday, but young Paolori, in turn named Ulysses, had been assigned to document Dennis's progress. She had expected to write a death report. Instead, she found herself writing something else entirely. "Subject continues to demonstrate anomalous psychological resilience," she recorded. When asked about his well-being via communication link, subject requested industrial degreaser. Claims the kitchen on floor 7 is, quote, "a real nightmare." Unclear if this is humor. It was humor. Dennis had developed a dark sense of it over 30 years of cleaning up messes no one else wanted to touch. On floor 10, Dennis discovered something important. The tower's anomalies responded to emotion. When the previous crews had entered with fear and weapons, the building had attacked. When Dennis entered with nothing but mild annoyance about the dust, it left him alone. He began treating the tower like he treated every old building he had ever worked in. He complained about its pipes. He muttered about the lack of proper ventilation. He thanked it when a door opened smoothly. "You're not so bad," he told the walls one evening. "Just need some attention. Been neglected too long. I know how that feels." The walls did not respond, but somewhere deep in the tower, something listened. Millie grew stronger each day. Her form became clearer, her memory sharper. She began guiding Dennis around the worst anomalies, warning him about areas where reality was too thin to walk safely. "You are strange," she told him one night. "All the others who came here brought weapons, equipment, plans to contain or destroy. You brought them up." Dennis shrugged. "Weapon wouldn't help me clean the floors. You do not fear death." He was quiet for a moment. "Already lost everything that mattered. What's death compared to that?" Millie understood. In her fragmented memories, she recalled the moment the experiment failed. The terror, the pain, and then nothing but centuries of screaming in the dark. "I think I was afraid too," she said. "When it happened, I think fear was the last thing I felt. And now," she considered, "now I feel something else. I do not have a word for it. Hope, maybe," Dennis suggested. "Perhaps." Millie's spectral form drifted closer. "There is something on floor 12, a door that has never opened. Something lives behind it. Something older than me." Dennis nodded. "Figured there was more to this place than dust and ghosts. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it." "You speak as if it will be simple." "Nothing's simple," Dennis said. "But I've got time. I've got a good mop." That night, he dreamed of Carol for the first time since arriving at the station. She was smiling. He woke to find Millie watching over him, a ghost standing guard against the darkness. It felt strangely like home. The elevator had not worked in 2 centuries, so Dennis took the stairs. Floor 20 existed in permanent twilight. The lights flickered between dim and darkness, and shadows moved in ways that had nothing to do with the light source. Dennis had brought a headlamp. He had also brought sandwiches. "You should not be here," Millie warned, floating beside him. "The upper floors are worse. Much worse. Someone's got to clean them," Dennis replied. 3 months had passed since he first entered the Obsidian Spire. Word of his survival had spread across the station and then across the sector. The crazy human janitor had become something of a legend. Aliens gathered at the tower's base every day just to watch him wave at them through the windows he always waved. It seemed polite. Floor 25 was stranger. Sometimes it existed normally. Sometimes it phased into another dimension entirely, becoming a landscape of crystalline structures and impossible colors. Dennis had learned to wait these episodes out. He would sit on the stairs, drink coffee from his thermos, and wait for reality to reassert itself. "The others are afraid of you," Millie told him during one of these waits. "Others, the other ghosts. There are dozens of us in the upper floors. We were all researchers once. We all died when the experiment failed." Dennis nodded. He had seen them watching from doorways and corners. Pale figures, less coherent than Millie, more fragment than person. "They think you will hurt them," Millie continued. "Everyone who came before brought weapons, containment equipment. They tried to destroy us or trap us. None of them tried to help." "Help how?" "I do not know. But you helped me. 3 months ago, I was nothing but pain and confusion. Now I remember my name, my work, my daughter's face." Her voice softened. "Her name was Rebecca. She was 7 when I died." Dennis was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry. 200 years ago. She would be long dead by now, even if she lived a full life." Millie's form flickered with old grief. "But I remember her. That is something." When floor 25 stabilized, Dennis continued climbing. Floor 30 was the catastrophe site. This was where the experiment had taken place. This was where reality had torn itself apart and something had crawled through from the space between dimensions. The door to floor 30 hung open, ripped from its hinges by forces no physical material could withstand. Beyond it, Dennis saw destruction, shattered equipment, scorched walls, and, at the center of it all, something that hurt to look at. The core entity.it was not shape. It was not a color. It was pain given form, a screaming vortex of dimensional energy that existed in constant agony. Reality warped around it, twisting and breaking. The very air vibrated with its suffering. Dennis watched it for a long moment. He had seen suffering before. In the eyes of patients at the hospitals he cleaned. In his own reflection after the funeral. This was different in scale, but not in kind that he walked into the room. The entity's screaming intensified. Warning. Threat. Stay away. Dennis ignored it. He found an overturned chair, righted it, and sat down. He pulled out his thermos and poured himself a cup of coffee. "Looks like you're having a rough time," he said. The screaming faltered. The entity had expected fear. Attack. Retreat. It had not expected someone to sit down and acknowledge its pain. "I've had rough times too," Dennis continued, sipping his coffee. "Spent 6 months barely getting out of bed after Carol died. Felt like something had torn a hole right through the middle of me. Like I'd never be whole again." The entity's light pulsed erratically. Confused. Listening. "Still not whole, really. Don't think I ever will be. But I learned something. The pain doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it better." He looked directly at the entity, ignoring the way reality bent around it. "I don't know what happened to you. Don't know where you came from or how you ended up here. But I know you're hurting. And I know you're alone. That's no way to exist." The entity's scream shifted. Not softer exactly, but different. Less rage. More grief. Dennis finished his coffee and stood up. "I gotta get back to work. But I'll come back tomorrow. And the day after. You don't have to be alone anymore." He walked out of floor 30, leaving the entity in stunned silence behind him. Outside the tower, Administrator Helwick watched the remote sensors with trembling hands. The readings made no sense. The entity had been stable for the first time in 2 centuries. Its energy output had decreased by 15% in the span of one conversation. "What is he doing?" Helwick whispered. Chief Dranik shook his massive head. "I do not know. But whatever it is, it's working." In his maintenance closet that night, Dennis sat with Millie and told her about floor 30. "You spoke to it," she said, disbelieving. "You actually spoke to the entity. Seemed like it needed someone to. It killed us. All of us. It destroyed everything. Did it mean to?" Millie stopped. She had never considered that question. In 200 years of hatred and fear, no one had ever asked if the entity had chosen to kill, or if it had simply been born screaming and never learned how to stop. "I do not know," she admitted. Dennis nodded. "Then I guess we'd better find out." He returned to floor 30 the next day, and the day after that. Each time, he just sat and talked, told stories about Earth, about Wisconsin winters and summer barbecues, about Carol and his kids and his grandkids who he missed every single day. The entity listened, and slowly, impossibly, it began to calm. Commander Voss had a simple solution to the Obsidian Spire problem. Destroy it. The Palori military officer stood before the Coalition Council, his gray uniform crisp and his 4 eyes cold with certainty. He had served for 40 years. He had seen threats contained, neutralized, and eliminated. He had never seen one befriended. "The entity is unstable," Voss declared. "The human has merely delayed the inevitable. I propose a targeted dimensional collapse. Clean, efficient, final, and everyone inside." Administrator Helwick asked, "The human?" "The spectral entities he has made contact with. Acceptable losses." In the gallery, Dr. Helene Marchetti clenched her fists. She was a human xenoarchaeologist, called to the station specifically to study Dennis's unprecedented success. She had expected to find a madman. Instead, she had found something that made her question everything she thought she knew about first contact. "With respect, Commander," she said, standing without permission, "the human has achieved in 4 months what the Coalition failed to achieve in 2 centuries. He has stabilized the entity. He has communicated with it. Destruction should be our last option, not our first." Voss turned his cold gaze to her. "You are a scientist, Dr. Marchetti. I'm a soldier. I deal with threats. That entity has killed hundreds. It will kill again. Will it? Or have we simply never given it a choice?" The council murmured. This was unprecedented territory. Inside the tower, Dennis knew nothing of the debate. He sat on floor 30 as he did every day, talking to the entity while drinking coffee from his thermos. "Carol used to make fun of my coffee habits," he told the swirling vortex of light and pain. "Said I'd have motor oil running through my veins by 60. She wasn't wrong, probably. The entity pulsed. Over the past weeks, Dennis had learned to read its rhythms. Calm when he spoke of peaceful things. Agitated when he mentioned violence or fear. Curious when he described things it had never experienced. What was she like? Millie asked. She floated nearby, her form clearer than ever. She had been helping Dennis understand the entity, translating its emotional fluctuations into something closer to words. Carol, Dennis smiled. Stubborn, kind, laughed at her own jokes even when they weren't funny. Best person I ever knew. You miss her. Every day. But missing her means I had something worth missing. That's not a curse. That's a gift. The entity's light shifted. Something in Dennis's words resonated with it. Millie tilted her head, listening to frequencies Dennis could not hear. It wants to know what a gift is. Dennis considered how to explain. A gift is something precious someone gives you. Not because they have to, because they want to, because they care about you. The entity pulsed again, stronger this time. A question without words. I think, Millie said slowly, it wants to know if anyone has ever given it a gift. Dennis looked at the entity. 200 years of pain. 200 years of being treated as a threat, a monster, a problem to be solved. No one had ever given it anything except fear and violence. Not yet, Dennis said. But that's going to change. The next day, he brought a small radio and played music. Beethoven. The entity had never heard music before. Its screaming stopped entirely for the first time since it was born. Dr. Marchetti arrived at the tower a week later, her scientific equipment packed and her skepticism firmly in place. She had read the reports. She had seen the sensor data. But she needed to witness it herself. Dennis met her at the entrance with his cleaning cart. You're the scientist? He asked. Dr. Helene Marchetti. I'm here to study your methods. Dennis shrugged. Not much to study. I just talk to it. That's impossible. The entity is pure dimensional energy. It doesn't have a consciousness we could communicate with. Tell that to it. He led her up to floor 30. When she saw the entity, her instruments went haywire. But when she saw how it calmed in Dennis's presence, how it pulsed in response to his words, her skepticism cracked. This shouldn't be possible, she whispered. A lot of things shouldn't be possible, Dennis replied. Doesn't stop them from happening. Over the next 2 weeks, Marchetti worked with Dennis to understand the entity better. Millie provided insights from her memories of the original experiment. The other ghosts, once terrified of the living, began to emerge and contribute their own fragmented knowledge. The picture that emerged was heartbreaking. The entity was not a monster. It was a child. The experiment had torn a hole between dimensions and pulled something through. Something young, something confused, something in constant pain from existing in a reality that was never meant to hold IT. IT had lashed out not from malice, but from agony. Every attack had been a scream for help that no one understood. We have to send it home, Dennis said. Not destroy it. Send it back where it belongs. Marchetti nodded slowly. It might be possible. The original rift was unstable, violent. But if we could create a controlled opening, then do it. She looked at him. The council will never approve it. Voss is pushing for destruction. He has support. Dennis stood up. His old knees protested. Then we'll have to change their minds. That night, he addressed the council via video link. He spoke simply, in the plain language of a man who had spent his life cleaning up other people's messes. That thing up there isn't evil, he said. It's lost. It's scared. It's been hurting for 200 years because nobody bothered to ask if it needed help. I'm asking now. Give us a chance to do this right. The council deliberated for 3 days. That on the 4th day, they gave Dennis 1 month to prove his approach could work, that if he failed, Voss would get his collapse. 28 days remained when the first ghost remembered how to laugh. His name had been Dr. Philip Reeves. He had been a dimensional physicist, one of the brightest minds of his generation. For 2 centuries, he had been nothing but a screaming echo in the upper floors of the Obsidian Spire. Now he stood in floor 30, watching Dennis teach the entity how to play music. You must press gently, Dennis instructed, guiding a tendril of light toward the small keyboard he had brought. Like this. The entity tried. The note that emerged was distorted, wrong, filtered through dimensions that should not touch. But it was a note. The entity had created something instead of destroying something. Doctor Reeves laughed. The sound was rusty from disuse, but real. I never thought I would see this, he said. Never in 200 years. Stick around, Dennis replied. Gets better every day. The deadline loomed, but Dennis refused to rush. He continued his routine. Wake, coffee, work, talk to the entity, sleep. The coalition monitored everything, their sensors recording every fluctuation, every moment of stability. Doctor Marchetti worked around the clock building the dimensional return device. The ghosts helped, their fragmented memories providing crucial knowledge lost to the living world. Millie coordinated their efforts, her form now solid enough to manipulate small objects. The original rift was created with force, she explained to Marchetti. We tried to tear through dimensions rather than ask permission. That is why it went wrong. Ask permission? From what? From reality itself. From a space between spaces. You cannot force a door. You must knock. It sounded like mysticism, but Marchetti had learned to trust Millie's insights. The ghost had been there when it happened. She understood things no living scientist could. On day 14, other humans from the station began visiting the tower. They came cautiously at first. A young engineer named David who had heard the stories. A retired pilot named Rosa who was curious. A child named Peter whose parents reluctantly allowed him a supervised visit. Dennis welcomed them all. He put them to work. Mop's over there, he told David. Floor 15 needs attention. I came to see the entity, David protested. Entity's busy. Floors are dirty. Get to work. Grumbling, David got to work. By the end of the day, he understood. The tower was not a tourist attraction. It was a place where people came to help. The cleaning was part of it. The presence was all of it. The aliens of the station watched in fascination as more and more humans entered the cursed tower and emerged unharmed. They brought food, music, stories. They sat with the ghosts and treated them like old friends rather than terrifying phenomena. Ambassador Prellis, a senior Bravari diplomat, requested a meeting with Dennis. I do not understand your species, Prellis admitted, her massive form filling the small maintenance closet Dennis called home. This building killed hundreds. It caused untold suffering. Yet you treat it with kindness. Dennis shrugged. Building didn't choose to be cursed. Entity didn't choose to be here. Ghosts didn't choose to die. Only ones who had choices were the people who abandoned this place for 200 years. Seems to me the building deserves an apology, not more punishment. Prellis was silent for a long moment. Your species is very strange. We get that a lot. On day 21, the device was ready. IT sat in the center of floor 30, a crude assembly of salvaged parts and theoretical physics held together by hope and desperation. Marchetti was not certain it would work. The ghosts were not certain it would work. Only Dennis seemed confident. It'll work, he said. How do you know? Marchetti asked. Because it has to. The entity had grown stronger over the past months. Its form was less chaotic now, its light more coherent. It had learned to communicate in simple ways. A pulse for yes, 2 pulses for no, a gentle glow when it was happy. Dennis had started calling it Little One privately. It seemed to like the name. We're going to send you home, he told it that night. Back to where you came from. Back to your family, if you have one. The entity pulsed with something that might have been hope. Then it flickered with something else. Fear. I know, Dennis said. Change is scary. But staying here hurts you. You deserve to be somewhere that doesn't hurt. Millie drifted close. What about us? When the entity leaves, the dimensional instabilities will collapse. We will fade. Dennis had known this was coming. The ghosts existed because of the entity's presence. When it left, there would be nothing to anchor them to this reality. You don't have to fade, he said. You could choose to pass on. Finally rest. And if we do not want to rest? Dennis looked at her. In 6 months, this ghost had become his friend, his partner in this strange mission. He did not want to lose her. Then we'll figure something out, he said. We always do. On day 27, Commander Voss arrived at the tower with a security detail. He had orders from the council to observe the final attempt. He also had orders to destroy the building if it failed. You have 3 days, he told Dennis. I hope you know what you are doing. Dennis looked at the commander. Then he looked at the entity, glowing softly in the center of floor 30. Then he looked at Millie and the other ghosts who had trusted him with their existence. So do I, he admitted. For the first time in 6 months, his hands shook slightly as he poured his coffee. The morning of the final day arrived with artificial sunrise filtering through the station's dome. Dennis woke at 6, as always. He brewed his coffee, as always. But nothing else about this day was normal. Today, he would either send little one home, or he would watch everything he had built be destroyed. Floor 30 was crowded. Dr. Marchetti stood at the device controls, her face tight with concentration. The ghosts gathered in a silent circle. Commander Voss watched from the doorway, his hand resting on the detonator that would trigger the dimensional collapse if things went wrong. And at the center of it all, the entity pulsed with nervous light. Ready? Dennis asked to point one pulse. Yes, Dennis nodded. He walked to the center of the room and stood directly in front of the entity. They had spent 6 months together. He had talked to it every day, shared his grief and his hope and his memories of a life it could never fully understand. Now it was time to say goodbye. I want you to know something, Dennis said. What happened here, the pain you caused, the people who died, that wasn't your fault. You didn't ask to be pulled into our reality. You didn't ask to exist in a place that hurts you. You were just scared and alone, and no one bothered to help. The entity's light shifted. Softer. Listening. I'm sorry it took so long for someone to try. I'm sorry you suffered for 200 years because we were too afraid to see you as anything but a monster. Dennis paused. You're not a monster. You just lost. And now it's time to go home. He stepped back. Dr. Marchetti, do it. Marchetti activated the device. The room filled with light. Not the violent, tearing light of the original catastrophe, but something gentler. A doorway forming instead of a wound. On the other side, Dennis could see something that hurt his human eyes to look at. A dimension of pure energy, of warmth and connection, of others like Little One. Waiting, the entity moved toward the rift. Then it stopped. A tendril of light reached back toward Dennis. It doesn't want to leave you, Millie translated, her voice thick with emotion. It says you're the first friend it ever had. Dennis's eyes stung. He had not cried since Carol's funeral. Go on, he said, voice rough. Your family's waiting. He forced a smile. And hey, you can always visit. The entity hesitated one more moment. Then it moved through the rift back to the dimension it came from. The last thing Dennis saw was a pulse of light that felt somehow like gratitude, the rift sealed behind it. But not completely. A thin thread of light remained, stable and warm. A connection between dimensions that had never existed before. The tower shuddered. Without the entity's presence, the dimensional instabilities began to collapse. The walls stopped breathing. The shadows stopped moving. The building became just a building. Commander Voss removed his hand from the detonator. There was nothing left to destroy. The ghosts began to fade. One by one, they felt the anchor of the entity's energy disappear, and their forms started to dissolve into the light they should have joined 2 centuries ago to Dr. Reeves smiled as he faded. Thank you, he said to Dennis, for giving us peace. Others followed. Dozens of spirits finally finding rest. Their long torment ended not by violence, but by kindness that Millie's form flickered. She looked at Dennis with something like fear. I don't want to go, she whispered. I finally remember who I am. I finally have a reason to exist. I don't want to fade. Dennis reached out his hand. Then don't. He did not know if it would work. He was no scientist, no expert in dimensional physics. He was just a janitor from Milwaukee who had learned that sometimes the impossible just needed someone stubborn enough to try. Millie took his hand. Her spectral fingers passed through his flesh, but something held. Something connected. And when the last of the dimensional energy faded, Millie remained. She was fainter now, almost transparent. But she was still there. How? She asked. Dennis shrugged. Guess you found a new anchor. 6 months later, the Obsidian Spire was the most popular landmark on Station Meridian. 7. Tours ran daily. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the building that had been cursed for 2 centuries and healed in 6 months. They came to hear the story of the human janitor who treated a dimensional horror with coffee and conversation. Dennis still worked as janitor. He had a staff now, volunteers from a dozen species who wanted to be part of something meaningful. The floors gleamed. The windows sparkled. The building stood proud instead of threatening. Millie served as the official historian. Her spectral form had become a beloved fixture, guiding tours and sharing memories of the scientists who had died here and finally found peace. And sometimes, late at night, a thin tendril of light would slip through the dimensional thread that still connected the tower to somewhere else. It would pulse warmly in greeting, checking on its friend. Dennis always had coffee ready. Tonight, he stood on the observation deck watching the stars. A young Palori visitor approached him. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you walk into the most cursed place in the galaxy and make it home?" Dennis sipped his coffee. He thought about the question for a long moment. "Every building's got problems," he finally said. "You just got to be patient, show it some respect, and keep showing up. Works for people too, come to think of it." He watched the stars. Somewhere out there, little one was safe and happy. Carol would have liked it here, he said softly to the tendril of light pulsed warmly through the dimensional thread, and a ghost who chose to stay put a translucent hand on his shoulder. The tower had been cursed for 200 years. It took one human with a mop, a thermos, and a willingness to simply be present to transform it into something else entirely. Not a prison, not a threat, not a problem to be solved out of home.